Today I want to show you 5 new AI features that business leaders simply can't ignore. I've compressed weeks of research into this short and actionable guide so you can get these methods working for you quickly. I'll cover detailed examples and use cases so that you can quickly visualize how this might fit into your own operations, whether that be marketing, data analysis, automation, or other areas. Understanding these new tools can give you an undeniable competitive edge. For each of these important new features, I'm going to give you a quick definition, followed by a quick setup rundown, and then a few example use cases I think you might find helpful. Today's examples include using Code Interpreter to analyze Google Analytics and other data, using custom instructions to get ChatGPT to act more like a marketing research expert. We'll be using GPT4's API access to get more creative responses as well as do bulk requests. I'll be discussing Anthropic's Claude and some of the ways that it's surpassing ChatGPT. And finally, I want to show you the absolute best tool for connecting AI to the internet. I have a cheat sheet version of this available in my Patreon if you find that might be a better way for you to digest all of this information. Otherwise, let's get after it. All right, so starting off with Code Interpreter, this allows for document upload and custom code to be created and run in the background. That's just the quick and dirty definition. Now jumping into a quick and dirty way to set this up before we get into our use case for the Code Interpreter. You want to click the little 3 dots next to your name to open that profile. Go into your settings and beta. From there, you want to go into the beta features and just turn that Code Interpreter on. And then you want to just scroll over. This part I think is a little bit confusing. Scroll over where it says GPT4 up at the top. If you're familiar with plugins, you engage Code Interpreter in the same way. So just scroll over that and then select Code Interpreter. From there, you'll see a little plus sign that shows up right by your chat window, but there's a whole lot of other stuff going on in the background there behind the scenes. There's actually a whole computer that's running Python for you there. So this software can now create its own custom code and run that code behind the scenes. So it's like having a programmer or a data analyst right there at your fingertips. The use case that I want to get into here is the Google Analytics analysis, and I'll show you how I did that in a second. But I also have a video around financial analysis. So look at my financial analysis plus AI video where I go through looking at monthly profit and loss statements for trends and for insights there using ChatGPT. Moving on over to my example here with Code Interpreter. The first thing I did, went into Google Analytics, selected a time frame here. I grabbed a little bit of data. You can grab as much as you like. And then I grabbed this little download it as a CSV. And from there, I'm able to load that into the Code Interpreter. So I used this little plus sign here and I uploaded my data export CSV. And I said, here is some Google Analytics data from my website. Can you pull this data into your memory so that we can perform some analysis on it? And I think just going step by step here and telling it one step at a time rather than saying, hey, give me some trends and useful insights. First, get it into its memory, get it into its data frame is a term it likes to use, and then do the analysis. So you can see I went through a few steps here to help it get it into its working memory. I've worked with this before. This exact same example went much smoother just a couple days ago, but today, for whatever reason, it stumbled through it. I opened up that CSV file up myself and I said, hey, it might be helpful to know that this file contains several chunks of data. Each chunk begins with a header section consisting of 3 rows, beginning with that # hashtag. And this header section will give you insight into what the data chunk is. Does this help? And yes, giving that a little bit of context helps it understand what the data is. You don't need a coding background to just keep nudging it in the right direction. And fairly soon, it'll start generating some useful stuff. So I have it here generating some traffic trends. It also generated some graphs here about what are the most top viewed pages, most frequent events. And from here, now it actually has the data in its working memory, and you can start asking it to do some analysis on it. And I should say it's not perfect right now. There have been times when it kept saying this very same graph that traffic was just going up and up. And I said, that's not really what the graph looks like to me. And it said, sorry, I was confused. I made a mistake. Actually, this graph is showing some different seasonal analysis, etc. So it's not perfect right now, but I think very soon it's going to get get much, much better. And I think it's worthwhile to start learning these tools and how to use Code Interpreter to analyze any kind of data, not just analytics, but any sort of data set that you can get your hands on. Here are some of those example prompts. I'll just leave this here for a second. You can take a screenshot of this, or I do have all of this stuff in a cheat sheet version in my Patreon. It's got all these prompts and a handful more walking you through all these different examples. So now I want to move into custom instructions, a pretty new feature that was just rolled out by OpenAI. And this, just a quick definition of what custom instructions are, is it allows you to improve your efficiency with ChatGPT by letting it know about yourself and how you would like it to respond. And this is stored in its memory for all future interactions. So if you're doing the same thing over and over with ChatGPT and you want to tell it, hey, answer in bullets, or my tone is this, or we're coming at a certain thing from a certain angle, a lot of people who use it frequently are putting in the same several prompts at the beginning just to get the LLM to understand where they're coming from. Now ChatGPT has a feature that allows you to store that in the background so it's always there, and we'll get into that in a second. So the quick setup here, again, very similar to where we went before. I'll show you a screenshot of this, but you just go into your profile, those three dots, and you enable custom instructions. I want to give a shout out. AI Advantage has done a lot of work in this area. So if you're looking to get really deep into these custom instructions, I would recommend checking out some of his videos on it. But here's just the quick and dirty of how to get this set up. Again, you just click those three little dots at the bottom and custom instructions. You may have to go into your beta features. It's changed a little bit. So if you don't see custom instructions in here, click around in your settings in beta, and you may need to click a slider in there for this to show up. But once you click on that, you're going to get a screen that looks just like this. And it's probably hard to read there, but the top text box there is asking, what would you like ChatGPT to know about you to provide better responses? And there's about a 1,500 character limit there. The bottom one, how would you like ChatGPT to respond? And there's another 1,500 character limit there. You can imagine this is asking, what do you want ChatGPT to know about you, and what do you want the format of the responses to be? Oftentimes, it's very wordy and it generates a lot of extra words, formats everything almost like a blog post a little bit. You might say, look, strip out all of the non-necessary words and strip out all of this stuff about how I'm just an AI model and so forth, because sometimes it'll say the same things over and over again, and you don't want to have to read that all the time. And more importantly, you don't want that taking up its context window. So it can hold a fair amount of information, but it is finite, and you want to just make sure that what it's holding in its memory is the most impactful. That's its responses as well as what you say to it. So when you are looking at how would you like ChatGPT to respond, one basic thing to just put in there is don't use any unnecessary words. Just very short and to the point responses is what I'm looking for. That may be a first way to go to really enhance all of the ways that you interact with this model. So here are some custom instructions. These are just some use cases, like I said, making it more concise and usable responses, tighter focus on what you want. So you might say, about me, I am a XYZ, describe yourself. And I'll get to an example of this so it knows where you're coming from. I also like to tell it to respond in bulleted lists. I like to potentially format those lists in a way where it's oftentimes right now it'll often give you a list of 10 or 12 different categories. But what I like is, hey, 3 big categories with 3 to 4 subcategories underneath each one. When it's responding, that is much more helpful to me to see these big 3 large categories of a response and then any subcategories underneath that. So bulleted lists is a good one. There's also some claims that it can help with your voice and tone in writing. I'm a little bit biased, and I haven't had ChatGPT really do a great job of tone and voice. I like it for other reasons, but I think this is a step in that direction. So here's an example you can see on the left-hand side. This is one that I did the exact same prompt, and how it, on the left-hand side, it did these different bullets. On the right-hand side, it's just this simple list. This is just kind of proof that it will answer something differently, but like anything, experiment with it and see what you can get out of it. Here is an example of an About Me, a marketing analyst. So this was something I've been experimenting with in that About Me section. It's a little bit long. I'm not going to read it. You can take a screenshot of it. You may want to try using all of that space to steer it as closely as you can in a certain direction, or you may want to experiment with just some very simple directions in there so you're not conflicting with yourself and confusing it. So there's an example of an About Me for a marketing analyst, and this is an example of the ChatGPT that you would put in that bottom text box to give you actionable suggestions, again, related to that marketing analyst position. So these would go here. This would be the About Me. This would be the ChatGPT response there. All right, now I want to move on to GPT4 API access. This is a little bit more technical, but I'd encourage you to stick with me here as it allows you to get a lot more out of these AI models. Now, in order to get started with GPT4 API, you're going to need to go to playground.openai.com. You're going to need to log in, and you're going to need to select the chat model plus GPT4. I'll show you what that looks like right here. Once you are logged in, you want to select on the right the chat mode and the GPT4 here, and you'll see you have now all these other different controls. We're getting under the hood of how ChatGPT works, and in this way you're able to steer this AI in a much more effective way. So here are some of the controls and advantages that you can play around with. The temperature is the biggest one, and this has been something that's been around in AI and machine learning for a very long time. It was one of the first concepts I learned about. I guess 2018 is when I started messing around with this stuff. And the temperature really allows you to adjust the amount of creativity and randomness versus generality and accuracy. So oftentimes ChatGPT will reply very similarly to similar requests. And if you are not getting what you want out of it, you might want to turn that temperature up inside of this inside of the GPT4 API. The temperature is right here. Just going a little bit higher will really change the results of whatever you put in your prompt. If you crank it all the way up to 2, it becomes almost complete nonsense gobbledygook there. Play around with it, maybe just 1.2, 1.25, and you'll see a very different result from just the one. And sometimes this will help it think outside of the box and get a little bit more creative. That way you'll get a little more edge to whatever you are working with it on. So the system message is also in there. You can see the system message here on the left-hand side. This is very similar, I believe, to those custom instructions that we just went through. By having something in the background stored, hard-coded into its memory about who you are and what you're looking to get out of the interaction with the AI is very helpful, especially as the conversation goes on and on. If you're working with just regular ChatGPT, you might kind of state who you are and what you're trying to get out of it early on in the conversation, and then you have a lot of back and forth with the AI, and it'll start to forget the stuff that you mentioned early on in the conversation. With this system message and also with those custom instructions, that is stored in there, and you're not going to lose that as you would if you had just started a conversation with that information. So that system message is very helpful. Also, I've read that the GPT-4 API may have better reasoning. It may be better at solving puzzles and summarizing different blocks of text. So it is different than the chat model. It's been trained a little bit differently, so there are some advantages there. There's a resource here around that. If you Google, Zapier did an article that's called ChatGPT versus GPT-4. Pretty interesting comparison if you want to dive deeper into that. Some use cases for it. One I didn't get to is bulk processing. So if you had a lot of different SEO keywords that you wanted GPT-4 to analyze, you can load those into a sheet. You can use GPT for Sheets, and it'll analyze those keywords. Or if you had a bunch of keywords and you wanted it to generate a bunch of article ideas or content ideas all in that spreadsheet, you can use this API to do that, where you can't do that in ChatGPT. You got to go one at a time or have it create lists, etc. So getting started with that bulk processing, I recommend this GPT for Sheets, which is a Chrome plugin. Be careful with that though, because the cost can add up quickly. I got excited about it. I put in 1,000 different keywords and my costs from OpenAI went up considerably. And also, if you keep opening the same document, it'll keep running those queries over and it can continuously run up your OpenAI bill. So be careful with it. I have a whole video about this, keyword research for ChatGPT. Other use cases, experimenting with that temperature and system message, especially for critical work. So if you're really trying to figure something out and ChatGPT gave you maybe a pretty good answer, but you want to see if there's more out there, try tossing it into that playground GPT4 and turning the temperature up. You'll get some very different results there. If you want to get a little more technical, really cool article that I'm getting into, Jeffrey Litt, codifying a ChatGPT workflow into a malleable GUI. So that's another way that you can start using this API on the back end to create your own apps, along with code interpreter he uses in there to build an app from scratch without a ton of coding experience. All right, so moving on, Anthropic Claude definitely deserves a mention. This is the first significant competitor to ChatGPT that we've seen, so everybody is pretty excited about it, especially as there's been so many different upgrades to ChatGPT for, I guess, safety precautions and things like that. And many folks were saying that its results are not as good as they were just a few months ago, and I think that is allowing for the competition to get in there, and this Anthropic Claude is the one to test out, I would say. So the setup is very easy. Just go to claude.ai. It's free. You can log in and use it. Some of the advantages there is that it can actually remember more information. So if you're working with larger documents, you can actually upload those into Claude and maybe have a little bit more accuracy working with them. It will admit when it doesn't know something instead of just guessing, and that honesty can be helpful. It costs less to use than GPT-4. It's actually free for now. And it was specifically trained to excel in certain tasks. So it's worth a try. Check it out. And finally, I just want to let you know about Perplexity AI. This is another tool I've been using. There are all sorts of ways to connect the AI to the web. There's plugins, but this tool seems to be the best when I'm doing research that needs to pull from recent sources on the web. So give Perplexity AI a look. All right, again, I have all of this in my Patreon in a cheat sheet version here. I've got all of the different prompts. I've got links to a few other things. There's some more resources in here. I do this for all of my videos. If you are interested in supporting this channel, please check it out. There's also some coaching options in there if you want to schedule some time to talk about how to implement AI with your team. I'd love to do that. And thanks a ton for watching. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment. That is super helpful, and I'll see you on the next video.
Do it! Make your dreams come true! Just do it!